Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo. And good morning, Vimbai. How's everybody doing?
Good morning. Adefemi.
Good. Lovely. I'm good, thank you. Good morning to you, viewers. Let me tell you what is happening around the world. Now, the UK government has turned down Nigeria's request to deport former Deputy Senate President Ekweremadu, who is serving a 9-year, 8-month sentence for organ trafficking. Now, Ekweremadu was convicted in the United Kingdom in 2023 under the Modern Slavery Act for conspiring to harvest a young Nigerian man's kidney. Now, a Nigerian delegation led by the Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugar and Attorney General Lateef Fagbemi had sought his repatriation so that he could complete the rest of his term here in Nigeria. But UK officials said they could not guarantee that he would continue his sentence in Nigeria and denied their request. Now, Ekweremadu remains in a UK prison while his wife Beatrice, who was released earlier this year, and co-defendant Dr. Obinna Obeta, who was sentenced to 10 years in prison related to this same crime, they've already served part of their sentences. Well, at the recently concluded Halifax International Security Forum in Canada, US Senator Kevin Cramer said Nigerian Christians are happy with US President Donald Trump's description of Nigeria as a disgraced country. Let's take a quick listen to this.
I think the Christians in Nigeria today are probably feeling pretty good about Donald Trump's position.
Well, in response, JJ Amojua, a Nigerian Christian, spoke for himself when he countered the senator's comments. Let's take a listen to what JJ had to say.
So I'm a Christian from Nigeria.
You're an expert.
1 out of 100 million Christians, very small sample size. I do not feel good about Donald Trump. He called Nigeria a disgraced country. Frankly speaking, that's not so bad because he used to call us a country. Since Donald Trump said what he said for Nigerian Christians, Christians have been abducted in the church in the northwest of Nigeria.
Sure.
Muslim students have been abducted. I do not speak to the causation, but there's a correlation between Donald Trump, from the point Donald Trump spoke about Nigeria's challenges and the escalation of terrorism. Is there a way to decently help Nigeria without making things worse and without disrespecting Nigerian Christians and Muslims?
Thank you very much.
The senator did, in fact, reply to that question. Essentially, he said that words do matter, but essentially actions also matter too. Well, moving on, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has again insisted that Kyiv will not gift any of its land to Russia, stressing that any peace settlement must respect Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Speaking after US-brokered talks in Geneva, they actually ended without any Russian direct participation. Zelensky himself said that the main problem remains Russia's demand for legal recognition of its occupation of parts of Donetsk, Luhansk, and other regions of Ukraine. Now, it's a demand he called for a breach of Ukraine's constitution and international law. Now, the peace talks saw a revised 28-point peace plan that would require Ukraine to cede occupied regions, cut its army size, and pledge never to join NATO. Now, these are conditions that Kyiv and European allies have strongly opposed. Now, moving over into Asia, and Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Donald Trump have discussed Trump visiting China in April 2026. Now, the pair had a discussion over the phone, and they also discussed Taiwan. China is insisting on Taiwan's eventual reunification with the mainland. Now, the remarks come amid heightened diplomatic friction between China and Japan after Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi warned that Tokyo might intervene militarily on this Taiwan issue. That's if China moves against taking Taiwan. This phone call between the two leaders also followed recent US arms sales to Taiwan and a tentative trade truce that saw Washington lower tariffs on Chinese goods by 10% and Beijing resume purchases of US soybeans and ease restrictions on rare earth exports. And finally, on today's edition of the World Brief, Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro says a change in medication caused him to have a nervous breakdown and hallucinations, prompting him to violate his house arrest conditions by removing his ankle monitor. Now, the Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes ordered the 70-year-old leader's preemptive jailing, and he labeled Bolsonaro a flight risk. Bolsonaro was sentenced to 27 years in prison in September for attempting a coup to remain in the presidency after his 2022 electoral defeat. Bolsonaro himself has insisted on his innocence and has told the judge that he hadn't been sleeping well and was feeling certain paranoia that stimulated his curiosity into opening the ankle monitoring device. Well, those are our well-briefed stories, but before we come over to my colleagues for their comments, let's take a look at the newspaper headlines. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day, and This Day leads with the report that the NNPC has posted 45.1 trillion naira in revenue and 5.4 trillion naira profit for 2024. This is up 88% and 64% respectively from 2023. Now, this growth, they say, is driven by operational efficiency, downstream reforms, and cost discipline. Also, as well as the Naira float. Also on the front page of This Day, at the top there, we see the picture headline of the Nigerian delegation that was recently led by National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu to Washington, D.C. to further collaborate on Nigeria's security challenges and how to alleviate them. Today is Tuesday, so we'll take a look at This Day's weekly insert, which is called Legal. Within Legal, we have Onikepo Braithwaite's weekly column called The Advocate. And in this week's edition, she highlights the worsening insecurity and nationwide issues that we see, again, targeting kidnappings in Kwara, in Kebbi, in Niger State. She criticizes successive governments for failing to protect citizens and the identities of 6 key drivers of insecurity. So, for example, she lists poor manpower, internal sabotage, corruption, weak equipment, and a lack of political will, as well as ineffective reforms as being this ecosystem contributing to the insecurity that we're facing here in Nigeria. To the Vanguard does report, let's take a look at the Vanguard, yes, that the US has urged Nigeria to essentially act quickly on school kidnappings in Kebbi and Niger, offering intelligence and defense support. In Niger, as we know, 265 people, mostly young pupils, remain missing from St. Mary's Catholic Church and in St. Mary's Catholic School. And then in Kebbi, 25 students were abducted, as well as the vice principal, unfortunately, who was killed. 50 students escaped, which we had, of course, been celebrating, but this doesn't really change the landscape of the insecurity issue that we have. Amnesty International, for example, have said that these attacks are threatening education in Nigeria. To the Daily Sun, it reports that the Southwest Governors Forum, which took place in Ibadan, has renewed its call for state police to tackle rising insecurity. The governors resolved to set up a Southwest Security Fund and a live digital intelligence sharing platform for rapid responses across the 6 states. They urged the federal government to deploy forest guards, regulate illegal mining, strengthen border monitoring, and reclaim forests used as criminal hideouts. Let's take a look at the leadership. Now, the leadership does report that the Central Bank of Nigeria has proposed a 5-year ban for individuals, 4 entities classified as serial bad check issuers. Under these draft guidelines, anyone issuing 3 dud checks will be barred from key banking services, including opening current accounts or accessing credit, and the banks themselves must cancel their unused check leaves. Now, repeat offenders may even face renewed sanctions, while banks that fail to enforce these issues, they risk themselves being punished sanctions up to 5 million naira penalty per violation. Now, the New Telegraph today does report that the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, as we see across the screen here, has formally registered as a member of the African Democratic Congress in Jada, Adamawa State. This is months after resigning from the PDP. Now, Atiku shared photos of his registration on X, confirming his move to the party, where he was issued a customized Waziri 01 card. Now, his defection ends long-standing speculation and comments about where he is going to go, and essentially it does mark his 4th party switch in the current political era. The Daily Independent has, as we've reported on the World Brief, essentially the United Kingdom and its refusal to oblige Nigeria's request to transfer Ekweremadu to serve the remainder of his jail term here in Nigeria. A reminder, Ekweremadu was convicted in 2023 of organ trafficking to benefit his daughter. He is serving 9 years and 8 months in prison. Now, the United Kingdom cited concerns that Nigeria could not guarantee continuation of his sentence should they release him. Now, The Guardian of the United Kingdom, it does report that hundreds of thousands of unpaid carers will have their cases reassessed after an official review found many were wrongly penalised due to government errors. Debts of up to £20,000 left some carers in hardship and even jailed in some instances. Now, the UK Independent does lead with warnings from the Office for Budget Responsibility, which has downgraded the United Kingdom's growth forecast for every year up until 2029, just as Chancellor Rachel Reeves, she is supposed to deliver her budget tomorrow on Wednesday. Now, the paper also carries this picture headline, of course, which announces the death of Jamaican reggae legend Jimmy Cliff, who is famed for classics like I Can See Clearly Now and for his appearance in the Harder They Fall film. He died earlier this week at the age of 81. So those are your World Brief stories, and those are your newspaper reviews. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
May his soul rest in peace. I love that. I can see clearly now. But
I didn't know it was
anyway,
his song. I don't know why I thought it was Labi Sifre. I just completely...
No, it's Jimmy Cliff. May his soul rest in peace. But at 81, he lived a full life. Now, where do we begin? Okay, let me begin with JJ Omojua. Yes. And, I think this video has brought up a conversation that we continue to have. It's recurring conversation, which is that what do we define as patriotism? So I'm going to give the example of what happened with South Africa when, remember when Caroline Levitt, said the South African president had been running his mouth. Yes. And then all South Africans came out to defend their president in that moment. And they said that, no, you do not speak to our president in that manner. We love South Africa. This is South Africa, and so forth. And it was very interesting because as soon as the G20 summit ended, they all went back to abusing because they don't like him. They don't like their president. They're not happy with the ANC in power. However, when it was a moment of defending country versus politics, they chose country. And of course, this is an ongoing debate that we continue to have here in Nigeria about, it has been tagged as demarketing Nigeria. Are you going to sit in a room where people are demarketing Nigeria? The debate is people on one side are saying that, well, if it's the truth, then it should be said. And then there are other people who are saying that, no, you always have to defend your country in a room where it's being attacked. Then you come back and we sort out our issues. Everybody's going to have to decide where they fall in that conversation, but I don't think it's a conversation that's going away anytime soon. I think Omojua did well, and I think it is important for us to always, balance the image, national image, versus our complexity of issues that we have. I round up with Ukraine. For me, Ukraine right now is at the precipice because beyond the deal and all the changes that are being made to the deal, the domestic crisis that Zelensky is currently facing at home is unprecedented. After the $100 million energy corruption scandal that just blew up a few days ago, he has sacked a number of his ministers. He's in essence now working in silo as a president. His approval ratings have dropped rapidly in Ukraine because Ukrainians are saying, we honored this person and we're supporting this person because he was supposed to lead us in victory against Russia, number one. But then he also guaranteed us that he would deal with corruption, that he would deal with government institutional weaknesses. And so he's now having to fight this war on two fronts, internationally against Russia and domestically against his own people. However, the real crux of this issue is whatever deal Zelensky signs concerning the peace deal, I don't think he's going to cede any territory. However, what deal he signs is going to need the backing of the people. So it's quite interesting to see how it will play out because many of them are calling for him to step aside as president, and they're calling for the general, I believe, Zaluzhny, who he had dismissed about last year or so, to come and work as president for them. So not a great time to be him. I don't envy him at all. I hope he can reconcile all of those challenges.
Right, just one, I think, comment on the JJ Omojua story. And of course, for obvious reasons, because it's trending. Senator Kevin Kramer made the mistake, I would say, error of generalization, made a sweeping statement that all Christians. But I mean, one can understand the spirit behind his arguments, meaning that Christians, a number of Christians are in support of President Trump wanting to come in to deal with the terrorists because, and designating or saying that Nigeria, the Christian genocide is happening in Nigeria because many of them have been calling and speaking out for a very long time. Now, in recent times, with this debate going on, Adefemi, there's been that conversation around the thin line between patriotism and propaganda. You want to know where to speak the truth in order to catalyze change, yes, and where to also speak up for your country, especially on international platforms. J.J. Omojowa did well, by responding and saying to, oh, well, I'm a Christian. He spoke for himself. Yes, and I'm glad that he acknowledged, yes, the fact that he was just it was a pinch, yeah, in the sample size. But speaking further is that no matter how much we say or an individual goes on the world stage to speak like this, the people who truly demarcate the nation are the people in government who do not rise up to their responsibilities. For instance, say all the good you might have about Nigeria, but look at what the UK is saying to us with a high-powered foreign delegation to speak on behalf of Senator Ekweremadu. They said that they cannot guarantee that when he comes back to Nigeria, the sentence will continue. This is the perception and the view of the international world with regards to our justice system. Because if you can say a lot, but as they say, what you do speaks louder, I cannot hear what you're saying. Absolutely. And so you can talk about, oh, let's all be patriotic and all that, but the truth speaks for itself. A disgraced nation. In that same breath, we had people, students who went to school kidnapped in Kebbi State, in Niger State, and we do not have yet a rescue. The ones that were rescued in Kwara State, there are still conversations around how were they rescued. Are we still engaging with bandits? And so when news like this comes out, you cannot accuse the people of being unpatriotic or not standing up for their country. The facts speak for themselves. Yes. And until our government take responsibility and step up to the place of leadership, unfortunately, no matter how much you try to make the situation look good, the facts will continue to speak for themselves.
Okay, the stories are so many, but let me see whichever ones I can take within the limited time constraint. First, the story about Ukraine. It's not about internal politics in Ukraine and the survival of Zelensky. It's about the attempt to find a ceasefire deal, ensure peace in the almost 4 years conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Now, the Americans, meeting with the Russians, had proposed a 28-point plan for peace, which was rejected, which was not accepted by Zelensky of Ukraine and also the European Union, because it was assumed that, it was controversial and it favored Russia. What is the major point here? It's about land, which Adefemi was talking about. Now, the Russians, they are already occupying the whole of eastern Donbass, which is Luhansk and Donetsk, yes, and then they are also in Crimea, they are in Zaporizhzhia, almost a quarter of Ukraine is occupied. Now, they are saying that that is what is convenient for them and that Ukraine should move out of those regions and its military should disarm immediately. Now the EU with Ukraine meeting in the presence of Marco Rubio of the United States on Sunday, then decided to use the 28-point plan by America to draw up another plan, an alternative plan. That alternative plan eliminates the third point in what the Americans proposed, and just adjusted it to such a way that from 28, we now have a 19-point plan for peace, but on land. Article 2 of the Ukrainian Constitution says that Ukraine is indivisible and inviolable. Article 5 talks about the fact that only the people of Ukraine, not even the state, can cede any part of the territory. It's called referendum. Article 73 of the Ukrainian Constitution now talks about that referendum. So it's still a controversial plan, yes, but the Russians say they don't accept it. They say it's completely unconstructive. Zelensky says it's a way forward. The Americans say, progress is being made. The other international issue will be Xi Jinping speaking on phone with President Donald Trump. You'll recall that they met in Busan, South Korea, last month, where they tried to mend fences. I think the important point here is that there is engagement between the US and China, and, you know, President Trump, who is so excited that, oh, China is a strong nation, says they will continue to talk, to the extent that he is likely to visit China in April, and then a state visit from Xi Jinping later in the year in 2026. Now, but there are issues. AI, intellectual property, soybeans, fentanyl, these are the major things they discuss. But the key thing is about the status of Taiwan. The president of China says Taiwan is a part of China, and that sooner or later Taiwan will be annexed. The premier of Taiwan says no. The US says no, because Taiwan is an ally. That's the point there. And that is also at the basis of the conflict between China and Japan, against whom, you know, China says, well, there will be no tourism, there will be no friendship with Japan, because Japan, the president that is there, the prime minister now, yes, Sane Takaichi, says that any attack on Taiwan, which is just about, you know, 90 miles on the southern coast of Japan away, will be a threat to Japan, and that Japan will have no option but to defend Taiwan. So those are the geopolitical dimensions of that interaction. So those are the only two time we allow me to
time, yes. Unfortunately, so many great stories this morning, important matters of national and international importance. Well, thank you so much, Adefemi. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.